Okay, excellent. Let me just say a few words here. So, for anyone who may be watching on YouTube at some point, we're beginning the Cyclops chapter of Ulysses today. And you might be interested to know that Joyce, in writing this chapter, pretty much went through the whole history of different styles of writing in English. And a lot of it is very kind of melodramatic, over the top type language, which can be a lot of fun to read. So, with that, I think I will go ahead and begin. I was just passing the time of day with old Troy of the DMP at the corner of Arbor Hill there. And be damned, but a bloody sweep came along and he near drove his gear into my eye. I turned around to let him have the weight of my tongue when who should I see dodging along Stony Banter? Only Joe Hines. "Lo, Joe," says I, "how you blowing? Did you see that bloody chimney sweep? Near shoved my eye out with his brush." "Suits luck," says Joe. "Who's the old bollocks you were talking to?" "Old Troy," says I, "was in the force. I'm of two minds not to give that fellow in charge for instructing the thoroughfare with his brooms and ladder." "What are you doing around these parts?" says Joe. "Yeah, devil a much," says I. "There's a bloody big foxy thief beyond by the garrison church at the corner of Chicken Lane. Old Troy was just giving me a winkle about him. Lifted my God's quantity of tea and sugar to pay 3 bobs a week. Said he had a farm in the county down, off a hop of my thumb by the name of Moses Herzog over there near Hitsbury Street." "Circumcised," says Joe. "Aye," says I, "bit off the top. An old plumber named Garrity. I'm hanging on to his taw now for the past fortnight, and I can't get a penny out of him." "Ah, that's the lay you're on now," says Joe. "Aye," says I, "how the mighty fallen, collector of bad and doubtful debts. But that's the most notorious bloody robber you'd meet in a day's walk, and the face on him all pockmarked would hold a shower of rain." Next, please.
"Tell him," says he. "I dare him," says he, "and I double dare him to send you round here again. Or if he does," says he, "I'll have him summoned up before the courts, so will I, for trading without a license." And he, after stuffing himself till he's fit to burst. Jesus, I had to laugh at the little Jewy getting his shirt out. "He drink me my teas, he eat me my sugars, because he no pay me my monies for non-perishable goods bought of Moses Herzog of 13 St. Kevin's Parade, Woodkey Ward, merchant, hereinafter called the vendor, and sold and delivered to Michael E. Garrity, Esquire of 29 Arbor Hill in the city of Dublin, Aaron Key Ward, gentleman, hereinafter called the purchaser, Vita Leche, 5 pounds of avoirdupois of first choice tea at 3 shillings per pound of avoirdupois, and 3 stone avoirdupois of sugar, crushed crystal at 3 pence per pound avoirdupois. The said purchase debtor to the said vendor of 1 pound 5 shillings and 6 pence sterling for value received, which amount shall be paid by said purchaser to said vendor in weekly installments every 7 calendar days of 3 shillings and no pence sterling. And the said non-perishable goods shall not be pawned or pledged or sold or otherwise alienated by the said purchaser, but shall be and remain and be held to be the sole and exclusive property of the said vendor, to be disposed of at his good will and pleasure until the said amount shall have been duly paid by the said purchaser to the said vendor in the manner herein set forth, as this day hereby agreed between the said vendor, his heirs, successors, trustees, and assigns of the one part, and the said purchaser, his heirs, successors, trustees, and assigns of the other part. Next, please.
"Are you a strict TT?" says Joe. "Not taking anything between drinks," says I. "What about paying our respects to our friend?" says Joe. "Who?" says I. "Sure, he's in John of God's off his head, poor man." Drinking his own stuff? Says Joe. Aye, says I. Whiskey and water on the brain. Come round to Barney Kiernan, says Joe. I want to see the citizen. Barney me borneen, says I. Anything strange or wonderful, Joe? Not a word, says Joe. I was up at that meeting in the City Arms. What was that about, Joe, says I. Cattle traders, says Joe, about the foot and mouth disease. I want to give the citizen the hard word about it. So we went round by the Linhall Barracks and the back of the courthouse, talking of one thing or another. Decent fellow, Joe, when he has it. But sure, like that, he never has it. Jesus, I couldn't get over that bloody Foxy Garrity, the daylight robber, for trading without a license, you see. In Inishvale the fair there lies a land, the land of holy Micha. There rises a watchtower beheld of men afar. There sleep the mighty dead, as in life they slept, warriors and princes of high renown. A pleasant land it is, in sooth of murmuring waters, fish-full streams where sport the gunnard, the plaice, the roach, the halibut, the jibbed haddock, the griselle, the dab, the brill, the flounder, the mixed coarse fish generally, and other denizens of the aqueous kingdom, too numerous to be enumerated. In the mild breezes of the west and of the east, the lofty trees wave in different directions their first-class foliage. The wafty sycamore, the Lebanonian cedar, the exalted plane tree, the eugenic eucalyptus, and other ornaments of the arboreal world with which that region is thoroughly well supplied. Lovely maidens sit in close proximity to the roots of the lovely trees, singing the most lovely songs while they play with all kinds of lovely objects, as for example, golden ingots, silvery fishes, crans of herrings, draughts of eels, codlings, reels of fingerlings, purple sea gems, and playful insects. And heroes voyage from afar to woo them. From Iblana to Slieve the peerless princes of unfettered Munster and of Connacht the Just, and of smooth, sleek Leinster, and of Crokin's land and of Armagh, the splendid, and of the noble district of Boyle, princes, the sons of kings. Next.
And there rises a shining palace, whose crystal glittering roof is seen by mariners who traverse the extensive sea in barks built expressly for that purpose. And hither come all herds and fatlings and first fruits of that land, for O'Connell Fitzimon takes toll of them, a chieftain descended from chieftains. Hither the extremely large wains bring foyton of the fields, flaskets of cauliflowers, floats of spinach, pineapple chunks, Rangoon beans, strikes of tomatoes, drums of figs, drills of swedes, spherical potatoes and tallies of iridescent kale, York and Savoy, and trays of onions, pearls of the earth, and punnets of mushrooms and custard marrows and fat vetches and beer and rape and red, green, yellow, brown, russet, sweet, big, bitter, ripe, pommelated apples, and chips of strawberries and sieves of gooseberries, pulpy and pelurious, and strawberries fit for princes, and raspberries from their canes. I dare him, says he, and I double dare him. Come out here, Garrity, you notorious bloody hill and dale robber. And by that way wend the herds innumerable of bellwethers, and flushed ewes, and shearling rams, and lambs, and stubble geese, and medium steers, and roaring mares, and polled calves, and long wools, and store sheeps, and cuffs, prime springers, and culls, and sow pigs, and bacon hogs, and the various. I should stop here. It's too big a sentence. The various different varieties of highly distinguished swine. Next, please.
Angus heifers and polybullocks of immaculate pedigree, together with prime premiated milch cows and beeves. And there is ever heard a trampling, cackling, roaring, lowing, bleating, bellowing, rumbling, grunting, champing, chewing of sheep and pigs and heavy-hooved kine from the pasture lands of Lusk and Rush and Carrick mines, and from the streamy vales of Thomond, from McGillicuddy's reeks, the inaccessible, and lordly Shannon, the unfathomable, and from the gentle declivities of the place of the race of Kiat, their udders distended with superabundance of milk, and butts of butter, and rennets of cheese, and farmers' firkins, and targets of lamb, and crannocks of corn, and oblong eggs in great hundreds, various in size, the agate with the dun. So we turned into Barney Kernan's, and there, sure enough, was a citizen up in the corner having a great confab with himself and that bloody mangy mongrel Gary Owen, and he waiting for what the sky would drop in the way of drink. Next, please.
There he is, says I, in his glory hole with his crushing lawn and his load of papers working for the cause. The bloody mongrel let a grouse out of him would give you the creeps. Be a corporal work of mercy if somebody would take the life of that bloody dog. I'm told for a fact he ate a good part of the breeches off a constabulary man in Santry that came round one time with a blue paper about a licence. Stand and deliver, says he. That's all right, citizen, says Joe. Friends here. Past friends, says he. Then he rubs his hand in his eye and says he, what's your opinion of the times? During the rapparee and rory of the hill, but begod, Joe was equal to the occasion. I think the market's run awry, says he, sliding his hand down his fork. So begod, the assistant claps his paw on his knee and he says, foreign wars is the cause of it. And says Joe, sticking his thumb in his pocket, it's the Russians wish to tyrannize. Give over your bloody cotton, Joe, says I. I've a thirst in me I wouldn't sell for half a crown. Give it a name, citizen, says Joe. Wine of the country, says he. What's yours, says Joe. Ditto Mac-Anisby, says I. 3 pints, Terry, says Joe. And how's the old heart, citizen, says he. Never better at Cara, says he. What, Gary, are we going to win, eh? And with that, he took the bloody old Towser by the scruff of the neck, and by Jesus, he nearly throttled him. Next, please.
Figure seated on a large boulder at the foot of a round tower was that of a broad-shouldered, deep-chested, strong-limbed, frank-eyed, red-haired, freely freckled, shaggy-bearded, wide-mouthed, large-nosed, long-headed, deep-voiced, bare-kneed, brawny-handed, hairy-legged, ruddy-faced, sinewy-armed hero. From shoulder to shoulder he measured several ells, and his rock-like mountainous knees were covered, as was likewise the rest of his body wherever visible, with a strong growth of tawny, prickly hair in hue and toughness similar to the mountain gorse, Ulex europaeus. The wide-winged nostrils, from which bristles of the same tawny hue projected, were of such capaciousness that within their cavernous obscurity the field-lark might easily have lodged her nest. The eyes, in which a tear and a smile strove ever for mastery, were of the dimensions of a good-sized cauliflower. A powerful current of warm breath issued at regular intervals from the profound cavity of his mouth, while in rhythmic resonance the loud, strong hail reverberations of his formidable heart thundered rumblingly, causing the ground, the summit of the lofty tower, and the still loftier walls of the cave to vibrate and tremble. He wore a long, unsleeved garment of recently flayed oxhide, reaching to the knees in a loose kilt, and this was bound about his middle by a girdle of plaited straw and rushes. Beneath this he wore trews of deerskin, roughly stitched with gut. His nether extremities were encased in high Balbriggan buskins dyed in lichen purple, the feet being shod with brogues of salted cowhide, laced with the windpipe of the same beast. From his girdle hung a row of sea stones, which dangled at every movement of his portentous frame, and on these were graven with rude yet striking art tribal images of many Irish heroes and heroines of antiquity. Cuchulainn, Conn of the 100 Battles, Niall of the 9 Hostages, Brian of Kincora, the Ordri Malachy, Art MacMurrough, Shane O'Neill, Father John Murphy, Owen Rowe, Patrick Sarsfield, Red Hugh O'Donnell, Red Jim McDermott, Thogart Owen O'Growney, Michael Dwyer, Francie Higgins, Henry Joy McCracken, Goliath, Horace Wheatley, Thomas Caniff, Peg Woffington, the village blacksmith, Captain Moonlight, Captain Boycott, Dante Alighieri, Christopher Columbus, St. Fursa, St. Brendan, Marshall McMahon, Charlemagne, Theobald Wolfetone, the mother of the Maccabees, the last of the Mohicans, the Rose of Castile, the man for Galway, the man that broke the bank at Monte Carlo, the man in the Gap, the woman who didn't, Benjamin Franklin, Napoleon Bonaparte, John L. Sullivan, Cleopatra, the Vorneen Deelish, Julius Caesar, Paracelsus, Sir Thomas Lipton, William Tell, Michelangelo, Hayes, Muhammad, the Bride of Lammermoor, Peter the Hermit, Peter the Packer, Dark Rosaline, Patrick W. Shakespeare, Brian Confucius, Murta Guttenberg, Patricio Velasquez, Captain Nemo, Tristan and Isolde, the first Prince of Wales, Thomas Cookin's son, the bold soldier boy, Aaron Apogue, Dick Turpin, Ludwig Beethoven, the Colleen Bawn, Wadler Heagley, Angus the Culdee, Dollymount, Sydney Parade, Ben Holt, Valentine Greatrakes, Giant Killer, Gautama Buddha, Lady Godiva, the Lily of Killarney, Valor of the Evil Eye, the Queen of Sheba, Aki Nagel, Joe Nagel, Alessandro Volta, Jeremiah O'Donovan Rossa, Don Philip O'Sullivan Bear. Next, please.
A couched spear of accumulated granite rested by him, while at his feet reposed a savage animal of the canine tribe, whose stertorous gasps announced that he was sunk in uneasy slumber, a supposition confirmed by hoarse growls and spasmodic movements, which his master repressed from time to time by tranquilizing blows of a mighty cudgel rudely fashioned out of Paleolithic stone. Say anyhow, Terry brought the 3 pints. Joe was standing, and begob the sight nearly left my eyes when I saw him hand out a quid. Oh, it's true as I'm telling you, a good-looking sovereign. And there's more where that come from, says he. Were you robbing the poor box, Joe, says I. Sweat of my brow, says Joe, 'twas the prudent member gave me the wheeze. I saw him before I met you, says I, sloping round by Pill Lane and Greek Street, with his cod's eye counting up all the guts of the fish. Who comes through Mycon's land, bedight in sable armor? O Bloom, the son of Rory, it is he, impervious to fear is Rory's son, he of the prudent soul. For the old woman of Princess Street, says a citizen, the subsided organ. The pledge-bound party on the floor of the house. And look at this blasted rag, says he. Look at this, says he. The Irish Independent, if you please, founded by Parnell to be the workingman's friend. Listen to the births and deaths in the Irish All for Ireland Independent, and I'll thank you, and the marriages. And he starts reading them out. Gordon, Barnfield Crescent, Exeter, Rethane of Liffey, St. Anne's-on-Sea, the wife of William T. Redmayne, of a son. How's that, eh? Brighton Flint, Vincent and Gillette, to Rotha Marion's daughter of Rosa and the late George Alfred Gillette. 179 Clapham Road, Stockwell, Haywood, and Ridsdale at St. Jude's, Kensington, by the very Reverend Dr. Forrest, Dean of Worcester, eh? Deaths. Bristow at Whitehall Line, London. Carr, Stoke Newington of gastritis and heart disease. Cockburn at the Moat House, Chepstow. I know that fella, says Joe, from bitter experience. Cockburn Dimsey, wife of David Dimsey, late of the Admiralty, Miller Tottenham, aged 85, Welsh. June 12th at 35 Canning Street, Liverpool. Isabella Helen. How's that for a national press? Eh, my brown son? How's that for Martin Murphy, the Bantry jobber? Ah, well, says Joe, handing round the booze. Thanks be to God they had the start of us. Drink that, citizen. I will, says he, honorable person. Health, Joe, says I, and all down the form. Don't be talking. I was the mouldy for the want of that pint. Declare to God I could hear it hit the pit of my stomach with a click. Next, please.
And lo, they quaffed their cup of joy. A godlike messenger came swiftly in, radiant as the eye of heaven, a comely youth. And behind him there passed an elder of noble gait and countenance, bearing the sacred scrolls of law, and with him his lady wife, a dame of peerless lineage, fairest of her race. Little Alf Bergen popped in round the door and hid behind Barney's snug, squeezed up with the laughing, and who was sitting up there in the corner that I hadn't seen snoring drunk, blind to the world? Only Bob Doran. I didn't know what was up, and Alf kept making signs out the door. And begob, what was it? Only that bloody old pantaloon Dennis Breen in his bath slippers, with two bloody big books tucked under his oxter, and his wife hotfoot after him, unfortunate wretched woman, trotting like a poodle. I thought Alf would split. Look at him, says he. Breen, he's traipsing all over Dublin with a postcard someone sent him with UP up on it to take a lit. And he doubled up. Take a what, says I? Libel action, says he, for £10,000. Oh, hell, says I. The bloody mongrel began to growl that it put the fear of God in you, seeing something was up, but the citizen gave him a kick in the ribs. Bid do boost, says he. Who? Says Joe. Breen, says Alf. He was in John Henry Menton's, and then he went round to Collison Ward's, and then Tom Rockford met him and sent him round to the sub-sheriff's for a lark. Oh, God, I've got a pain laughing. U.P. up. The long fellow gave him an eye as good as a process, and now the bloody old lunatic has gone round to Green Street to look for a G-man. Next, please.
When is Long John going to hang that fellow in Mountjoy, says Joe. Bergen, says Bob Doran, waking up. Is that Alf Bergen? Yes, says Alf. Hanging? Wait till I show you. Here, Terry, give us a pony, that bloody old fool. £10,000. You should have seen Long John's eye. U.P. And he started laughing. Who are you laughing at, says Bob Doran. Is that Bergen? Hurry up, Terry boy, says Alf. Terence O'Ryan heard him and straightway brought him a crystal cup full of the foaming ebon ale which the noble twin brothers Bungave and Bungardalon brew ever in their divine ale vats, cunning as the sons of deathless Leda, for they garner the succulent berries of the hop and mass and sift and bruise and brew them, and they mix therewith sour juices and bring the must to the sacred fire, and cease not night or day from their toil, those cunning brothers, lords of the vat. Then did you, chivalrous Terence, hand forth, as to the manner born, that nectarous beverage, and you offered the crystal cup to him that thirsted, the soul of chivalry, in beauty akin to the immortals. But he, the young chief of the O'Bergens, could ill brook to be outdone in generous deeds, but gave therefore with gracious gesture a testoon of costliest bronze. Thereon embossed in excellent smithwork was seen the image of a queen of regal port, see out of the house of Brunswick, Victoria her name, her most excellent majesty, by grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and of the British dominions beyond the sea, queen, defender of the faith, Empress of India, even she who bore rule, a victress over many peoples, the well-beloved, for they knew and loved her from the rising of the sun to the going down thereof, the pale, the dark, the ruddy, and the ethereal. Next, please.
What's that bloody Freemason doing? Says the citizen. prowling up and down outside. What's that? Says Joe. Here you are, says Al, chucking out the rhino. Talking about hanging. I'll show you something you never saw. Hangman's letters, look at here. So he took a bundle of wisps of letters and envelopes out of his pocket. Are you kidding, says I. Honest Injun, says Al, read them. So Joe took up the letters. Who are you laughing at? Says Bob Doran. So I thought it was going to be a bit of a dust. Bob's a queer chap when the porter's up on him. So says I, just to make talk, how's Willie Murray those times, Al? I don't know, says Al. I saw him just now on Capel Street with Paddy Dignam, only I was running after that. You what? Says Joe, throwing the letters down. With who? With Dignam, says Al. Is it Paddy? Says Joe. Yes, says Al. Why? Well, do you know he's dead? Says Joe. Paddy Dignam dead? Says Al. Aye, says Joe. Sure, I've just seen him not 5 minutes ago, says Al, as plain as a pikestaff. Who's dead? Says Bob Doran. You saw his ghost then, says Joe. God between us and harm. Says Al. Christ, only 5. What? And Willie Murray with him. The two of them there near, what you call them? What? Dead. What about Dignam? Says Bob Doran. Who's talking about? Dead, says Al. He's no more dead than you are. Maybe so, says Joe. They took the liberty of burying him this morning, anyhow. Aye, says Al. Aye, says Joe. He paid the debt of nature. God be merciful to him. Good Christ, says Al. Begob. He was what you might call flabbergasted. Next.
In the darkness, spirit hands were felt to flutter, and when prayer by tantras had been directed to the proper quarter, a faint but increasing luminosity of ruby light became gradually visible. The apparition of the etheric double being particularly lifelike owing to the discharge of jivic rays from the crown of the head and face. Communication was effected through the pituitary body and also by means of the orange, fiery, and scarlet rays emanating from the sacral region and solar plexus. Questioned by his earth name as to his whereabouts in the heaven world, he stated that he was now on the path of pralaya, or return, but was still submitted to trial at the hands of certain bloodthirsty entities on the lower astral levels. In reply to a question as to his first sensations in the great divide beyond, he stated that previously he had seen as in a glass darkly, but that those who had passed over had some possibilities of atmic development opened up to them. Interrogated as to whether life there resembled our experience in the flesh, he stated that he had heard from more favored beings now in the spirit that their abodes were equipped with every modern home comfort, such as Talafana, Alavator, Hitalda, Wataklasat, and that highest adepts were steeped in waves of volupcy of the very purest nature. Having requested a quart of buttermilk, this was brought and evidently afforded relief. Asked if he had any message for the living, he exhorted all who were still at the wrong side of Maya to acknowledge the true path, for it was reported in divanic circles that Mars and Jupiter were out for mischief on the eastern angle where the ram has power. It was then queried whether there were any special desires on the part of the defunct, and the reply was, "We greet you, friends of Earth, who are still in the body. Mind, CK, doesn't pilot on." Next, please.
It was ascertained that the reference was to Mr. Cornelius Kelleher, manager of Messrs. H.J. O'Neill's popular funeral establishment, a personal friend of the defunct who had been responsible for the carrying out of the interment arrangements. Before departing, he requested that it should be told to his dear son Patsy that the other boot, which had which he had been looking for was at present under the commode in the return room, and that the pair should be sent to Cullen's to be sold only as the heels were still good. He stated that this had greatly perturbed his peace of mind in the other region, and earnestly requested that his desire should be made known. Assurances were given that the matter would be attended to, and it was intimated that this had given satisfaction. He is gone from mortal haunts, O Dignam, son of our morning. Fleet was his foot on the bracken, Patrick of the beamy brow. Wail, Banba, with your wind, and wail, O ocean, with your whirlwind. There he is again, says the citizen, staring out. Who, says I. Bloom, says he. He's on point duty up and down there for the last 10 minutes. And begob, I saw his physog do a peep in and then slitter off again. Little Alf was not boways. Faith he was. Good Christ, says he, I could have sworn it was him. Next, please.
And says Bob Doran, with the hat on the back of his head, lowest blackguard in Dublin when he's under the influence. Who said Christ is good? I beg your pardon, says Alf. Is that a good Christ, said Bob Doran, to take away poor little Willie Dignam? Aye, well, yes, Alf, trying to pass it off. He's over all his troubles. But Bob Doran shouts out of him, he's a bloody ruffian, I say, to take away poor little Willie Dignam. Terry came down and tipped him the wink to keep quiet, that they didn't want that kind of talk in a respectable licensed premises. And Bob Doran starts doing the weeps about Paddy Dignam, true as you're there. The finest man, says he, snivelling the finest, purest character. The tear is bloody near your eye, talking through his bloody hat. Fitter for him to go home to the little sleepwalking bitch he married, Mooney, the bum bailiff's daughter. Mother kept a kip in Hardwick Street that used to be stravaging about the landing, Bantam Lyons told us. That was stopping there at 2 a.m, without a stitch in her, exposing her person, open to all corners, fair field and no favour. The noblest, the truest, says he, and he's gone, poor little Willie, poor little Paddy Dignam. And mournful and with a heavy heart he be wept the extinction of that beam of heaven. Old Gary Owen started growling again at Bloom that was skeezing round the door. Come in, come on, he won't eat you, says the citizen. So Bloom slopes in with his cod's eye on the dog, and he asks Terry, was Martin Cunningham there? Oh, Christ McKeown, said Joe, reading one of the letters. Listen to this, will you? Next, please.
And he starts reading out one. 7 Hunter Street, Liverpool. To the High Sheriff of Dublin, Dublin. Honoured Sir, I beg to offer my services in the above-mentioned painful case. I hanged Joe Gann in Bootle Jail on the 12th of February 1900, and I hanged, show us, Joe, says I, Private Arthur Chase for foul murder of Jesse Tilsted in Pentonville Prison, and I was assistant when, Jesus, says I, Billington executed the awful murderer Toad Smith. The citizen made a grab at the letter. Hold hard, says Joe. I have a special knack of putting the noose once in, he can't get out, hoping to be favoured. I remain, honoured sir, my terms is 5 guineas, H. Rumbled, Master Barber. And a barbarous bloody barbarian he is too, says the citizen. And the dirty scrawl of the wretch, says Joe. Here, says he, take them to hell out of my sight, Alf. Hello, Bloom, says he, what will you have? So they started arguing about the point. Bloom saying he wouldn't and couldn't and excuse him, no offence and all to that. And then he said, well, he'd just take a cigar. God, he's a prudent member, no mistake. Give us one of your prime stinkers, Terry, says Joe. And Alf was telling us there was one chap sent in a mourning card with a black border around it. They're all barbers, says he, from the Black Country, that would hang their own fathers for 5 quid down and travelling expenses. And he was telling us there's 2 fellows waiting below to put his heels down when he gets the drop and choke him properly. And then they'd chop up the rope after and sell the bits for a few bob a skull. In the dark land they bide, the vengeful knights of the razor, their deadly coil they grasp. Yea, and therein they lead to Erebus, whosoever white hath done a deed of blood, for I will on no wise suffer it, even so saith the Lord. So they started talking about the capital punishment. And of course, Bloom comes out with the why and the wherefore and all the codology of the business, and the old dog smelling him all the time. I'm told those Jewies does have a sort of a queer odor coming off them for dogs about I don't know what, all the deterrent effect, and so forth and so on. There's one thing it hasn't a deterrent effect on, says Alf. What's that, says Joe. The poor bugger's tool that's been hanged, says Alf. That's so, says Joe. God's truth, says Alf. I heard that from the head warder that was in Kilmainham when they hanged Joe Brady, the Invincible. He told me they cut him up. They cut him down after the drop. It was standing up in their faces like a poker. Next, please.
Rule and passion strong in death, says Joe, as someone said. That can be explained by science, says Bloom. It's only a natural phenomenon, don't you see? Because on account of the... And then he starts with his jawbreakers about phenomenon and science and this phenomenon and the other phenomenon. The distinguished scientist, Herr Professor Luitpold Blumenduft, tendered medical evidence to the effect that the instantaneous fracture of the cervical vertebrae and consequent scission of the spinal cord would, according to the best approved traditions of medical science, be calculated to inevitably produce in the human subject a violent ganglionic stimulus of the nerve centers, causing the pores of the corpora cavernosa to rapidly dilate in such a way as to instantaneously facilitate the flow of blood to that part of the human anatomy known as the penis or male organ, resulting in the phenomenon which has been denominated by the faculty a morbid upwards and outwards philoprogenitive erection in articulo mortis her diminutionem capitis. So, of course, the citizen was only waiting for the wink of the word, and he starts gassing out of him about the Invincibles and the Old Guard and the men of 67 and who fears to speak of 98, and Joe with him about all the fellows that were hanged, drawn, and transported for the cause by drumhead court-martial, and a New Ireland, and New this, that, and the other. Talking about New Ireland, and he ought to go and get a new dog, so he ought, mangy, ravenous brute, sniffling and sneezing all around the place, and scratching his scabs. And round he goes to Bob Doran, that was standing alpha half one, sucking up for what he could get. So, of course, Bob Doran starts doing the bloody fool with him. Give us the paw. Give the paw, doggy. Good old doggy. Give us the paw here. Give us the paw. A bloody end to the paw he'd paw, and Alf trying to keep him from tumbling off the bloody stool atop of the bloody old dog, and he talking all kinds of drivel about training up kindness and thoroughbred dog and intelligent dog. Give you the bloody pip. Then he starts scraping a few bits of old biscuit out of the bottom of Jacob's tin he told Terry to bring. Gob, he galloped it down like old boots, and his tongue hang out of him a yard long for more. Near ate the tin and all, hungry, bloody mongrel. And the citizen and Bloom having an argument to the point. The brothers Shears and Wolf Tone beyond an Arbor Hill, and Robert Emmett, and Die for Your Country, the Tommy Moore touch about Sarah Curran, and He's Far from the Land. And Bloom, of course, with his knock-me-down cigar, putting on swank with his lardy face. Phenomenon. The fat heap he married is a nice old phenomenon with a back on her like a ball alley. Time they were stopping up in the City Arms, Pissa Burke told me there was an old one in there with a cracked toodle Hermon of a nephew, and Bloom trying to get the soft side of her doing the mollycoddle, playing bezique to come in for a bit of the wampum in her will, and not eating meat of a Friday, because the old one was always thumping her craw and taking the lot out for a walk. And one time He led him the rounds of Dublin, and by the holy farmer, he never cried crack till he brought him home as drunk as a boiled owl. And he said he did it to teach him the evils of alcohol. And by herrings, if the three women didn't near roast him. It's a queer story, the old one, Bloom's wife and Mrs. O'Dowd that kept the hotel. Jesus, I had to laugh at Pisserburk taking them off, chewing the fat, and Bloom with his, but don't you see? And on the other hand, and sure more betokened, the lout and old was in Powers after, the blenders round in Cope Street, going home footless in a cab 5 times in the week after drinking his way through all the samples in the bloody establishment. Phenomenon. Next, please.
The memory of the dead, says the citizen, taking up the pint glass and glaring at Bloom. Aye, aye, says Joe. You don't grasp my point, says Bloom. What I mean is, Sinn Fein, says the citizen, Sinn Fein ahan. And friends we love are by our side and foes we hate before us. Last farewell was affecting to the extreme. From the belfries far and near, the funeral death bell toiled unceasingly, while all around the gloomy precincts rolled the ominous warning of 100 muffled drums, punctuated by the hollow booming of pieces of ordnance. The deafening claps of thunder and the dazzling flashes of lightning which had lit up the ghastly scene testified that the artillery of heaven had lent us supernatural pomp to the already gruesome spectacle. A torrential rain poured down from the floodgates of the angry heavens upon the bared heads of the assembled multitude, which numbered at the lowest computation 500,000 persons. A posse of Dublin's Metropolitan Police, superintended by the Chief Commissioner in person, maintained order in the vast throng, from whom the York Street Brass and Reed Band whiled away the intervening time by admirably rendering on their black-draped instruments the matchless melody endeared to us from the cradle of Speranza's plaintive muse. Special quick excursion trains and upholsteried carabancs had been provided for the comfort of our country cousins, of whom there were a large contingent. Considerable amusement was caused by the favorite Dublin street singers, LNHN and MLLGN, who sang the night before Larry was stretched in their usual mirth-provoking fashion. Our two inimitable drolls did a roaring trade with their broadsheets among lovers of the comedy element, and nobody who has a corner in his heart for real Irish fun without vulgarity would grudge them their hard-earned pennies. The child of the male and female Foundling Hospital, whose thronged windows overlooking the scene were delighted with this unexpected addition to the day's entertainment, and a word of praise is due to the Little Sisters of the Poor for their excellent idea of affording the poor, fatherless, and motherless children a genuinely instructive treat. Next, please.
The vice-regal house party, which included many well-known ladies, was chaperoned by their excellencies to the most favorable positions on the grandstand, while the picturesque foreign delegation, known as the Friends of the Emerald Isle, was accommodated on a tribune directly opposite. The delegation, present in full force, consisted of Commendatore Baci Benino Benoni, the semi-paralyzed doyen of the party, who had to be assisted to his seat by the aid of a powerful steam crane. Monsieur Pierre Paul Petite Paton, the grand joker Vladimir Pokathankerchev, the arch-joker Leopold Rudolf von Schwanzenbad Holdenthaler, Countess Marha Viraga Kizassoni Putrapesti, Hiram Wybambus, Count Athanatos Karamelopoulos, Ali Baba Bakshi Shwahat, Lokam Effendi, Signor Hidalgo Caballero Don Picadillo y Palabras y Paternoster de la Malora de la Malaria, Okapoka Harakiri, He Hung Chung, Olaf Carber Kettleson, Mynheer Treat van Trumps, Pan Polax Patty Risky, Goose Pan Krachenobritich, Herr House Director President, Hans Quickly Strelly, National Gymnasium, Museum, Sanatorium, and Suspensorium, Ordinary Privacy, Cent General, History Special Professor Dr. Kriegfried Oeber Allgemein. All the delegates, without exception, expressed themselves in the strongest possible heterogeneous terms concerning the nameless barbarity which they have been called upon to witness. An animated altercation in which all took part ensued among the FOTEI as to whether the 8th or the 9th of March was the correct date of the birth of Ireland's patron saint. In the course of the argument, cannonballs, scimitars, boomerangs, blunderbusses, stink pots, meat choppers, umbrellas, catapults, knuckle dusters, sandbags, lumps of pig iron were resorted to, and blows were freely exchanged. Next, please.
The baby policeman, Constable McFadden, summoned by special courier from Booterstown, quickly restored order and with lightning promptitude proposed the 17th of the month as a solution equally honourable for both contending parties. The ready-witted 9-footer's suggestion at once appealed to all and was unanimously accepted. Constable McFadden was heartily congratulated by all the FOTEI, several of whom were bleeding profusely. Commandant Attore Benibenone, having been extricated from underneath the presidential armchair, it was explained by his legal advisor, Avvocato Pagamini, that the various articles secreted in his 32 pockets had been abstracted by him during the affray from the pockets of his junior colleagues in the hope of bringing them to their senses. The objects, which included several hundred ladies' and gentlemen's gold and silver watches, were promptly restored to their rightful owners, and general harmony reigned supreme. Quietly, unassumingly, Rumbold stepped onto the scaffold in faultless morning dress and wearing his favourite flower, the Gladiolus cruentus. He announced his presence by that gentle Rumboldian cough, which so many have tried unsuccessfully to imitate, short, painstaking, yet withal so characteristic of the man. The arrival of the world-renowned headsman was greeted by a roar of acclamation from the huge concourse, the viceregal ladies waving their handkerchiefs in their excitement, while the even more excitable foreign delegates cheered vociferously in a melody of cries, Hoc, Banzai, Edjan, Zidvivo, Chin Chin, Polokronia, Hip Hip Vive, Allah, amid which the ringing eviva of the delegate of the land of song, a high double F, recalling those piercingly lovely notes with which the young Catalani beglamoured our great-great-grandmothers, was easily distinguishable. It was exactly 17 o'clock. The signal for prayer was then promptly given by megaphone, and in an instant all heads were bared. The Commendatore's patriarchal sombrero, which had been in the possession of his family since the revolution of Reinzi, being removed by his medical advisor in attendance, Dr. Pippi. And the learned prelate who administered the last comforts of holy religion to the hero martyr when about to pay the death penalty, knelt in a most Christian spirit in a pool of rainwater, his cassock above his hoary head, and offered up to the throne of grace fervent prayers of supplication. Hard by the block stood the grim figure of the executioner, his visage concealed in a 10-gallon pot, with 2 circular perforated apertures through which his eyes glowered furiously. As he awaited the fatal signal, he tested the edge of his horrible weapon by honing it upon his brawny forearm, or decapitated in rapid succession a flock of sheep, which had been provided by the admirers of his fell but necessary office. Next, please.
On a handsome mahogany table near him were neatly arranged the quartering knife, the various finely tempered disemboweling appliances, specially supplied by the world-famous firm of cutlers, Messrs. John Round and Sons, Sheffield, a terracotta saucepan for the reception of the duodenum, colon, blind intestine, and appendix, etc., when successfully extracted, and 2 commodious milk jugs destined to receive the most precious blood of the most precious victim. The house steward of the Amalgamated Cats and Dogs Home was in attendance to convey these vessels when replenished to that beneficent institution. Quite an excellent repast consisting of rashers and eggs, fried steak and onions, done to a nicety, delicious hot breakfast rolls and invigorating tea had been considerately provided by the authorities for the consumption of the central figure of the tragedy, who was in capital spirits when prepared for death and evinced the keenest interest in the proceedings from the beginning to end. But he, with an abnegation rare in these our times, rose nobly to the occasion and expressed the dying wish, immediately acceded to, that the meal should be divided in aliquot parts among the members of the Sick and Indigent Roomkeepers Association as a token of his regard and esteem. Next, please.
The neck and non plus ultra of emotions were reached when the blushing bride-elect burst her way through the serried ranks of the bystanders and flung herself upon the muscular bosom of him who was about to be launched into eternity for her sake. The hero folded her willowy form in a loving embrace, murmuring fondly, "Sheila, my own." Encouraged by this use of her Christian name, she kissed passionately all the various suitable areas of his person which the decencies of prison garb permitted her ardor to reach. She swore to him as they mingled the salt streams of their tears that she would ever cherish his memory, that she would never forget her hero boy who went to his death with a song on his lips as if he were but going to a hurling match in Clonturk Park. She brought back to his recollection the happy days of blissful childhood together on the banks of Anna when they had indulged in the innocent pastimes of youth, and oblivious of the dreadful present, they both laughed heartily, all the spectators, including the venerable pastor, joining in the general merriment. The monster audience simply rocked with delight, and anon they were overcome with grief and clasped their hands for the last time. A fresh torrent of tears burst from their lacrimal ducts, and in the vast concourse of people, touched to the inmost core, broke into heart-rending sobs, not the least affected being the aged prebendary himself. Big, strong men, officers of the peace, and genial giants of the Royal Irish Constabulary were making frank use of their handkerchiefs, and it is safe to say that there was not a dry eye in that record assemblage. A most romantic incident occurred when a handsome young Oxford graduate, noted for his chivalry towards the fair sex, stepped forward and, presenting his visiting card, bank book, and genealogical tree, solicited the hand of the hapless young lady, requesting her to name the day, and was accepted on the spot. Every lady in the audience was presented with a tasteful souvenir of the occasion in the shape of a skull and crossbones brooch, a timely and generous act which evoked a fresh outburst of emotion. And when the gallant young Oxonian, the bearer, by the way, of one of the most time-honored names in Albion's history, placed on the finger of his blushing fiancée an expensive engagement ring with emeralds set in the form of a four-leaf shamrock, the excitement knew no bounds. Nay, even the stern Provost Marshal, Lieutenant Colonel Tompkin Maxwell, French Merlin Tomlinson, who presided on the sad occasion, he who had blown a considerable number of sepoys from the cannon mouth without flinching, could not now restrain his natural emotion. With his mail gauntlet, he brushed away a furtive tear and was overheard by those privileged burghers who happened to be in his immediate entourage to murmur to himself in a faltering undertone, "Next, please."
God blimey if she ain't a clinker, that there bleeding tart. Blimey, it makes me kind of bleeding cry straight. It does. When I see her cause, I thinks of my own mash tub, what's waiting for me down Limehouse Way. So then the citizens began talking about the Irish language and the cooperation meeting and all to that, and the Shunines that can't speak their own language, and Joe chipping in because he struck someone for a quid, and Bloom putting in his old goo with his 2-penny stump that he catched off Joe, and talking about the Gaelic League and the anti-treating league and drink and the curse of Ireland. And anti-treating is about the size of it, gob. He'd let you pour all manner of drink down his throat till the Lord would call him before you ever set the foot on his pint, the throat of his pint. And one night I went in with a fellow into one of those musical evenings, song and dance, about she could get up on a thrush of hay, she could my Maureen lay. And there was a fellow with a Ballahooly blue ribbon badge spiffing out of him in Irish, and a lot of Colleen Bones going about with temperance beverages, and selling medals and oranges and lemonade, and a few old dry buns, gob, flahoola, entertainment, don't be talking. Ireland sober is Ireland free. And then an old fellow starts blowing into his bagpipes, and all the gauchos shuffling to their feet to the tune the old cow died of. And one or two sky pilots having an eye around that. There was no going on with the females hissing below the belt. So how and ever, as I was saying, the old dog, seeing the tin was empty, starts mousing about by Joe and me. I'd train him by kindness, so I would, if he was my dog. Give him a rousing fine kick now and again where it wouldn't blind him. After he'd bite you, says the citizen sneering. No, says I, but he might take my leg for a lamppost. So he calls the old dog over. Next, please.
What's on you, Gary? Says he. Then he starts hauling and mauling and talking to him in Irish, and the old Towser growling, letting on to answer, like a duet in the opera. Such growling you never heard of, as they let off between them. Someone that has nothing better to do ought to write a letter pro bono publico to the papers about the muzzling order for a dog the like of that. Growling and grousing, and his eye all bloodshot from the truth is in it, and the hydrophobia dropping out of his jaws. All those who are interested in the spread of human culture among the lower animals, and their name is Legion, should make a point of not missing the really marvelous exhibition of synanthropy given by the famous old Irish red wolf dog setter, formerly known by the sobriquet of Gary Owen, and recently rechristened by his large circle of friends and acquaintances, Owen Gary. The exhibition, which is the result of years of training by kindness and a carefully thought out dietary system, comprises, among other achievements, the recitation of verse. Our greatest living phonetic expert, wild horses shall not drag it from us, has left no stone unturned in his efforts to delucidate and compare the verse recited, and found it bears a striking resemblance, the italics are ours, in the ranns of ancient Celtic bards. We are not speaking so much of those delightful love songs with which the writer, who conceals his identity under the graceful pseudonym of Little Sweet Branch, has familiarized the book-loving world, but rather as a contributor, DOC points out, in an interesting communication published by an evening contemporary, of the harsher and more personal note, which is found in the satirical effusions of the famous Raftery and of Donald MacConsidine, to say nothing of a more modern lyricist at present, very much in the public eye. We subjoin a specimen which has been rendered into English by an eminent scholar whose name for the moment we're not at liberty to disclose, though we believe that our readers will find the topical allusion rather more than an indication. The metrical system of the canine original, which recalls the intricate alliterative and isosyllabic rules of the Welsh endlin, is infinitely more complicated, but we believe our readers will agree that the spirit has been well caught. Perhaps it should be added that the effect is greatly increased if Owen's verse be spoken somewhat slowly and indistinctly in a tone suggestive of suppressed rancor. The curse of my curses. 7 days every day, and 7 dry Thursdays on you, Barney Kiernan, has no sup of water to cool my courage and my guts red soaring after Lowry's lights. So he told Terry to bring some water for the dog, and gob, you could hear him lapping it up a mile off. And Joe asked him, would he have another? I will, says he, a cara, to show there's no ill feeling. Next, please.
Gob, he's not as green as he's cabbage looking, arsing around from one pub to another, leaving it to your own honor with old Giltrap's dog, and getting fed up by the ratepayers and corporations. Entertainment for man and beast. And says Joe, could you make a hole in another pint? Could have swim ducks, says I. Same again, Terry, says Joe. Are you sure you don't want to have anything in the way of liquid refreshment, says he. Thank you, no, says Bloom. As a matter of fact, I just wanted to meet Martin Cunningham, don't you see, about this insurance of poor Dignam's. Martin asked me to go to the house. You see, Dignam, I mean, didn't serve any notice of the assignment on the company at the time, and nominally under the act, the mortgage can't recover on the policy. Holy wars, says Joe, laughing. That's a good one if old Shylock is landed. So the wife comes out top dog, what? Well, that's a point, says Bloom, for the wife's admirers. Whose admirers, says Joe? The wife's advisors, I mean, says Bloom. Then he starts all confused, mucking it up about the mortgagor under the act, like the Lord Chancellor giving it out on the bench, and for the benefit of the wife, and that's a trust is created. But on the other hand, that Dignam owed Bridgman the money, and if now the wife or the widow contested the mortgage's right till he near had the head of me addled with his mortgagor under the act. He was bloody safe he wasn't running himself under the act that time as a rogue and vagabond. Only he had a friend in court, selling bazaar tickets, or what do you call it, Royal Hungarian Privileged Lottery. True as you're here. Oh, commend me to an Israelite, Royal and Privileged Hungarian robbery. So Bob Doran comes lurching round asking Bloom to tell Mrs. Dignam he was sorry for her trouble, and he was very sorry about the funeral, and to tell her that he said, and everyone who knew him said that there was never a truer, a finer than poor little Willie that's dead, to tell her, choking with bloody foolery and shaking Bloom's hand doing the tragic, to tell her that, shake hands, brother. You're a rogue and I'm another. Let me, said he, so far presume upon our acquaintance, which, however slight it may appear, if judged by the standard of mere time, is founded, as I hope and believe, on a sentiment of mutual esteem, as to request of you this favor. But should I have overstepped the limits of reserve, let the sincerity of my feelings be the excuse for my boldness. Next, please.
Hey, I think this is a appropriate place to stop today. Let me put a mark here. Okay, so that is can I get the page numbers of the various editions that people are reading?
$312 from Penguin.
Okay, Penguin. Okay, 312. Thank you, sir.
Gabler's 257.
257. Okay. Any other editions we want to make a note of?
Wordsworth, the Wordsworth I'm reading is 283.
Yeah.
There's different editions of Wordsworth.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's the first I've heard of that. Okay. All right. Very good. And then, I'm also starting, I think, I think from this point on, I'll try to put the Gabler place, not the Gabler, but the Gutenberg link to where we're starting in the chat at the beginning of each time. All right. That was fun. Bill, I think you did a great job
Yeah.
of Bob Doran in particular. That you understood that he was drunk as a skunk.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he's such a great character, and I don't think he's often given his due there in terms of his condition.
Yes, well, you honored his condition today, for sure. And
He's
you
been
did an excellent job.
zigzagging. He's been zigzagging through the story.
Yeah.
The street, sort of thing. Today he speaks. It's fantastic after a long wait.
I like to give Gary Owen his due as a dog poet too, and that bit of poetry that they quote, I like to do it in a dog's voice.
Well,
too,
okay. Please,
Yeah.
7 days every day, and 7 on you, my criminal, and no stop of water to cool my courage, and my guts red running after running right.
That's doggerel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a true doggerel.
So he's the fourth writer in the novel. Bloom fancies himself, and so does Stephen, and Buck Mulligan has written the Ballad of Jesus, Joking Jesus, but but Gary Owen is ahead of Bloom and Stephen. In output.
I was curious about the sevens. There was 2 mentions of the 17th or 17, and
That's the National Feast Day.
it's
St.
National
Patrick's Day.
Feast Day.
Yeah,
Oh,
St. Patrick.
Feast of St. Patrick.
they were having a
Oh,
row
okay.
as to
Right.
which date,
Which date should the national feast fall on? Because
and
there
they were
was,
both sides were wrong.
Yeah,
the
right.
policeman comes along and suggests the 17th.
Right.
I love the Paddy Dignam seance.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. And the Anglo-Indian words,
Yes. Yeah.
elevata, and
Elevator, yeah. Telefona.
telefona,
Called a water closet.
water closet.
Yeah. Yes, he's taken making parody of the Theosophical Society in Dawson Street.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And they Joyce and what's the name? Buck Mulligan's real self broke into the building in Dawson Street and moderately ransacked the office of the Theosophical Society.
Yeah.
So he's kind of having a little dig at them here. Gogarty, of course, Gogarty and Joyce.
So you're telling us an actual tale.
Oh yes, that
Gogarty
is,
and Joyce broke into the philosophical.
the Theosophical Society, and
Theosophical.
they didn't vandalize the place. They just must have been looking for something. I don't know what they were doing. I know how they effected entry. They might have had a key, but they shouldn't have been there. And they left a note, signed it in the name of John Eglinton, who we haven't met John Eglinton yet, have we? Oh, we have, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
We have. Yeah,
Back
back
in the library, yeah. But they signed it. It was me what done it. Signed John Eglinton. You know, on an item of ladies' underwear that they brought with them. So there you go. It's
Oh, the night before Larry was stretched, the boys, they all paid him a visit. A bait in their bags too they fetched, and they sweat in their gobs till they riz it. For Larry was ever the lad, if a boy was condemned to the squeezer, would fence all the duds that he had to treat an old friend to the sneezer and moisten his gob before he died. The boys, they came crowding in fast, so they drew all their stools all around him. 6 glimpses of the porter were placed, for he wouldn't be well waked without 'em. When one of us asked would he die without having duly repented, says Larry, that's all in my eye, and first by the clergy invented to gain a fat bit for themselves. Then I'm sorry, poor Larry, says I, to see you in this situation, and blister my limbs if I die. To have upon it had been my own station. A chalk on the back of the neck is all that Jack Ketch cares to give you, and mind such trifles affect, for why should the likes of them grieve you? And now, boys, come tip us the deck. The cards being called for, they played, till Larry found one of them cheating. Quick he made hard rap at his head, for this lad was easily beaten. So you'll cheat me because I'm in grief? Be the Jesus if that be your reason. I'll have you to know, you damned thief, that your crack and your joke's out of season, and I'll throttle your knob with me fist. The clergymen came with their book and spoke to him so neat and civil. Larry tipped him the Kilmainham look and tossed his big wig to the devil. Then Larry, he raised up his head and taking a sup from the bottle, he cried like a baby and said, the rope will soon round my neck throttle to squeeze my poor windpipe to death. So moving these last words he spoke, we all vented our tears on a shower. For my part, I thought my heart broke to see him cut down like a flower. On his travels we watched him next day, and the hangman, I thought I could kill him, but Larry not one word did say, till he came to King William, when his color grew horribly white. When he came to the gallows at last, he was tucked up so neat and so pretty, the rumblers jogged him off his feet, and he died with his face to the city. He kicked too, but that was all pride, for soon you could see 'twas all over. Soon after the rope was untied, and at dark we waked him in clover and sent him to take his ground sweat. Poor Larry.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes.
Excellent. Poor Larry.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I don't think we can top that.
Oh, you could. That was pretty poor, but I'd try again some other time.
Well, Tom
Yeah, it was
got it
great.
today, and it was good. I think it's a good place to end. And I will. Do you have the verses? Do you have the link to the verses there?
I can get them. I've got them somewhere. I learned it from Frank Hart from one of his recordings of
Okay.
Dublin songs.
Okay. Well, I'll look this afternoon also and see if I can find some verses and post those on the Facebook site. But yeah. Any last comments, questions, concerns, whatever?
Did you meet Frank Hart, Bill?
Sadly, no. Yeah, I wish I had.
He was a terrific character.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
And very, very generous with his knowledge, with his songs. I mean, almost so many of the great singers like Karen Casey and you name them, all these great Irish singers learned songs from Frank.
He has a grandchild now who sings in his style.
Really.
And he is terrific. Yeah.
If you haven't heard him, it's very Dublin, very nasal.
Yeah.
But really effective.
Is that H-A-R-T?
E.
H-A-R-T-E.
Okay. Thank you.
My two favorite lines from today are when you meet someone and you say anything strange or wonderful, because people still say that.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
on, so instead of any news, anything strange or wonderful. And if something gives you the pip,
Yeah.
it gives me the pip. And I just think that, I mean, they're still used today, but you don't hear them that often. So
That's because the pips are removed from the fruit order before you eat.
Yeah. That's the point about all the beautiful, the fair country of Mickens and all the comely maidens singing. This is the fish market, and these are the fishwives that are the comely maidens, and the beautiful building described is the Dublin fruit and vegetable market.
Yeah.
I love that Rumbold is Horace Rumbold. He's the British ambassador to Switzerland during Joyce's time. And he makes him the chief executioner. It's just,
He
and I think there's two other guys there as well, Smith and his car there. You know the Gann and Smith guys he had the row with in the consulate. He puts them in for the execution letter. That's
That's right.
it's hilarious. It's got to be the funniest episode of the book.
Okay, well, I think I will say thank you all so very much. And we will be gathering by the digital river again
Yes.
next Thursday.
Thank you.
Grand.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
thank you.
everybody.
Good night
Bye-bye.
now.
Very much, everyone.